It was at this moment he knew. He fucked up.
Guilty-looking face in the history of investigative journalism. If this was a soap opera, the director would probably tell the actor to tone it down a little bit, to at least give the viewer a shred of doubt that he's not completely full of shit.
Happy New Year, squaddies! New Year, same royals, and apparently the same secrets. Because just as we enter 2026, we've learned that official government files relating to Prince Andrew were quietly pulled from public release after journalists had already been allowed to see them. And whenever information is briefly visible before it's suddenly hidden again, that's when people start paying attention. That's when questions begin. And that's when trust starts to crack. So the question everyone is now asking is very simple. What are they really hiding? And perhaps even more importantly, who exactly is being protected? Let's break this down. Under the UK's 20-year rule, government departments are required to release historical documents to the public through the National Archives so that citizens can understand how decisions were made in their name. This year, as part of that routine annual release, a Cabinet Office file from 2004-2005 was transferred. A file that included minutes of meetings discussing royal travel and official engagements, including those of Prince Andrew when he was still the Duke of York. Journalists were given early access under embargo, so they could prepare their reporting in advance, as is standard practice. But after journalists had already reviewed the documents, something strange happened. The public version of the file was quietly altered. The minutes referring to Prince Andrew were removed before the public ever got to see them. They weren't delayed for review, they weren't flagged as sensitive, and they weren't officially classified. They were simply pulled. And that's what makes this so troubling. When information is first cleared, then shown, and then quietly hidden, it doesn't feel like bureaucracy. It feels like someone changed their mind after realizing what transparency would mean. The Cabinet Office's explanation for this sudden disappearance was that it was merely an administrative error and that the files had never been intended for release. But critics say that explanation doesn't make sense. These files went through the proper review process. They were cleared for release. They were provided to journalists. They were part of the formal archival transfer. This was not a document accidentally emailed to the wrong person. Das others wabatuduras osan amud was a document formally approved for public record. So when the explanation suddenly shifts after the fact, people are right to be skeptical. It doesn't look like a mistake, it looks like regret, it looks like someone realized the implications of openness and decided secrecy was safer. And in a democracy, when openness is treated as a threat, something has gone very wrong. This issue lands differently today because Prince Andrew is no longer a working royal. He has been stripped of his military roles, royal patronages, and official duties amid ongoing controversy over his past associations. Allegations he has always denied involved wrongdoing. So, if he no longer represents the monarchy officially, no longer performs public duties, and no longer serves the state in any formal role, why are documents involving him still being shielded as if he does? That question is at the heart of public frustration. If these protections no longer serve a constitutional function, then what do they serve? Reputation? Institutional comfort? The avoidance of embarrassment? And if the system still bends to protect someone who no longer even officially belongs to it, then that suggests the system exists primarily to protect itself. Republic's chief executive Graham Smith put it bluntly when he said there should be no royal exemption at all, especially not for someone who is no longer an active royal. And he went further by suggesting that the purpose of this secrecy isn't to protect Andrew personally, but to protect the institution surrounding him, to protect its image, to protect its networks, to protect its internal relationships and historical decisions from public scrutiny. In other words, this isn't about one man. It's about preserving the untouchable status of a system that has long operated beyond meaningful oversight. And that is precisely what troubles so many people. Not that mistakes exist, but that mistakes cannot be examined. Ironically, journalists who saw the removed minutes have said the content itself appeared fairly mundane. It discussed. None of it appeared explosive on its own. No scandal, no confession, no dramatic revelation, which only deepens the mystery. Because if the content was so harmless, why hide it? Why pull it back? Why remove it after the fact? You don't censor boring paperwork unless you're afraid of what people might connect it to. Transparency doesn't threaten stable systems. It threatens fragile ones. This incident doesn't exist in isolation. Royal-related documents are routinely withheld, delayed, or exempted under special rules that don't apply to other public bodies. And this happens not because of national security, and not because of personal safety, but because the monarchy occupies a strange space where public funding and private power coexist without sufficient accountability. And that combination is dangerous. When public money is involved, transparency is not optional. It is essential. Without it, trust erodes. And without trust, institutions lose legitimacy. So let's be honest about what this really is. This isn't about one document, or one prince, or one administrative decision. It's about who gets protected by the state, who gets shielded from scrutiny, and who the rules truly apply to. It's about whether power still answers to the public, or whether it now answers only to itself. When files vanish, when explanations don't add up, and when secrecy overrides process, people don't become angry because they hate the system. They become angry because they no longer trust it. So, squaddies, what do you think? Is this really just an innocent administrative error? Or is this another example of how the royal institution is protected from scrutiny even when that protection no longer serves the public interest? Let me know in the comments, because sunlight is the one thing secrecy fears, and accountability is the one thing power always resists. Happy New Year, squaddies, and welcome to 2026, the year of asking better questions.
Same building, the same setting, now overshadowed by a photograph newly released from the Epstein files. That image shows Andrew, as he then was, sprawled across the laps of 5 women, while Ghislaine Maxwell looks on, smiling. Andrew was not among the guests this year. He was excluded. But the coincidence is impossible to miss.
I think this drip feed of revelations is drawing out the agony. I think it's also a nail in his coffin in terms of him having to speak to the authorities, both here and in the States.
This latest storm comes from the release of thousands of pages of material by the United States Department of Justice. Around 20,000 pages have been made public so far, and with each release, Andrew's name reappears. There's emails, photographs, travel references, and language that raises serious questions. One email in particular has been widely quoted this week. It dates back to 2001. Allegedly, Andrew is writing to Maxwell from Balmoral, signing off as AXXX. He writes, and I am quoting here, "I am up here at Balmoral summer camp for the royal family, totally exhausted. The girls are completely shattered. How's LA? Have you found me some new inappropriate friends?" Maxwell replies that she has only found appropriate friends. Andrew responds with a single word: distraught.